Hello and welcome to the Watchful Citizen, a local access program presented by the Lancaster County Democratic Party. Today's guest is Nebraska State Senator Ken Haar. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you.
Ken, you represent Legislative District 21, which is the northwestern portion of Lancaster County. Can you tell us a little bit about your district and then follow up maybe with giving our viewers a little bit of a history about Ken Haar and how you got to where you are?
Sure. Well, like you say, I'm Northwest Lincoln, actually. About 80% of my constituents are actually Northwest Lincoln, which includes Air Park, the Highlands, Fallbrook, and so on. And then, rural Northwest Lancaster County. So I have an interesting mix of constituents, and that's neat. I got involved with politics in about 1980 with the County Democratic Party. Still remember those days fondly. I was on the Lincoln City Council from 1989 through 1997. I served as executive director of the state party for 3 years around the year 2000. And then somebody suggested I think about legislature, and so I've been in the legislature now for 7 years. I have 1 year to go.
Fabulous. The first session of the 104th Legislature ended in June. There's 3 things I'd like to ask you about the session. How would you rate this session on a scale of 1 to 10, being 10 very productive and 1 not so productive?
Yeah, I suppose I've seen the questions beforehand, so I agonized over this, maybe about an 8.
Okay, that's pretty good. It's pretty high.
Oh, I think it's pretty good. Considering, and again, since we're on a partisan program here, I believe there are 14 Democrats out of 49. So I'm proud of the legislature. We're nonpartisan, and everybody knows everybody else's party, but it's really a group of people that generally acts and behaves with the best of common sense, does their homework, and so on. And so I'd say some of the really, I would say, productive things that happened. One, of course, is that we abolished the death penalty. That was exactly 30, and it overrode the governor's veto, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit more later, because we haven't heard the end of that, obviously. We were the last state, I believe, in the union, but we finally gave driver's licenses to the dreamers, to the young people who came to this country with undocumented workers, but they've grown up, they've gone to our schools, they're Americans. And so I was very proud of that, very pleased with that. Again, that was with an override of the governor's veto. So in both of those cases, you can see that it wasn't just Democrats. In fact, it was mostly Republicans that we had to depend on. Then we also are raising the gas tax little by little to help pay for the roads and bridges. I look at that as a user fee, and obviously, the needs keep growing, and the current tax rate was quite old. Again, over the governor's veto, and so it's the legislature in a thinking mode, and I really appreciate that.
And I think that Nebraskans did too. They think that state senators work only during the time that the legislature is in session. The truth is you work nearly every day of the year. Can you kind of tell us when you're out of session, what kinds of activities do state senators get involved in?
Well, I dream about it. I'm consistently talking with constituents and with people on the issues that I'm working on. This summer I went to 2 conferences, the NCEL, the National Conference of Environmental Legislators, and then the NCSL, the National Council of State Legislators. Both of those were in Seattle. And both of those are really great meetings. For me, it's kind of, especially the NCSL meetings, kind of like a smorgasbord. You get to go and explore things you're not all that familiar with. So I think I've been to that meeting every year I've been in the legislature.
So you're doing some ongoing self-education on the issues and
Oh, yeah.
bringing that knowledge back to when you are in session then.
Exactly.
To make bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tons of meetings.
Great. What are you doing to prepare for the next session and for the legislation that you plan to introduce?
Well, I've been working over the years, especially on energy, renewable energy, wind energy, and so I have some bills, and climate change I'd include in there too. Some bills that I'm working on for this upcoming session, and the best way I learn about things is to sit down with a group of people, and so I've been doing this on both of those issues. I look forward to that. I was on the education committee for 6 years. I'm not on that committee anymore, so my meetings haven't gone in that direction. But
what accomplishments on the education side have you seen in the last several sessions as far as supporting education in Nebraska?
Well, the last session, for example, we have a school formula funding formula called TIOSA, and actually it was fully funded this last session. So my goal has always been to fully fund, especially K through 12. And then I think there's been a growing awareness and growing funding for preschool, recognizing how children, the brain develops the most during the first 3 years. And one of the sessions I went to at the NCSL meeting, they used a really neat term. They said during those first 3 years, the brain recruits data. So it's not like just these kids are, you know, as up to 3, it's not just like they're watching and taking in, but their brains are actually out there looking for more input. They're recruiting data. And I think there's a growing awareness. I think a neat goal would be someday that we would spend more on preschools than we do on prisons, because the two are connected.
Absolutely. But I just want to, you know, I'll
Sure.
get off script a little bit. That kind of brought to mind supporting families when their children are in school by having family leave opportunities when they need it, daycare provisions for working parents. Where does the state stand in terms of providing programs like that?
Well, one of the programs, again, that's being looked at by the Education Committee and the legislature is doing some funding is before and after school programs. We have one school in Lincoln, for example, where kids are provided with breakfast and lunch and supper and stuff to do in between. Not just stuff, but educational things that are not only interesting so kids will want to do it, but also they're educational. And I think, I wouldn't swear to this, but I think that it's a majority of families now that are one parent. And trying to be one parent, raising children and so on is a real task. And so almost that borderline between parenting and schools and community is really starting to blur, because often the community has to raise the children in ways that just families did it before.
And I know that from interviewing other persons working with the education of our children in this state have also mentioned that 40 to 50% qualify for the school lunch program, and that's really high, I think. What are we doing to lower those numbers? What can we do?
The thing that we can certainly do as a society is the education piece, and I think that more and more that's going to include probably more and more school. We see countries around the world that are collapsing this long summer vacation into little bits here and there and doing almost full year school. Preschool, I think, should be a right of all children. And So
it's a long-term goal
it's a long-term goal
get them off.
in that direction.
Another one would be raising the minimum wage so that
of course.
it's more affordable, and Nebraska certainly did that, and I think, is it 2016 that we're going to raise it up to $9, I believe, dollars an hour?
I think
and
that's the
hopefully that
date
will
and the number,
will be more supportive of families trying to raise children, too. During the most recent session of the legislature, you introduced and had several bills passed into law. Can you tell us a little bit about those? LB 116 was one, change election procedures and membership for certain sanitary and improvement district boards of trustees. Can you, that's kind of a...
Well, that sounds pretty technical.
Yeah, that's getting in the weeds. But tell our viewers what that was all about.
Well, sanitary improvement districts, or SIDs, are political subdivisions that are usually very close to a major city, and really the hope of the SID is that someday they're going to be absorbed by the city. A lot of expansion has happened, for example, in Omaha through SIDs. To begin with, they take care of their own streets and everything, but again, eventually they hope to be absorbed by the city. One of the SIDs in Lincoln is Emerald out on West O Street. And so being a political subdivision, each of those has a board that's in law of how many people and so on. But the SID, for example, at Emerald is very small, and it's hard finding people to serve on the board anymore. At least one of the members is over 90 years old. So this bill just simply said if you have a certain size SID, certain small number, you can have less board members.
Now, is that particular area inside or outside of your district, or just
it's
close?
Inside my district.
It's inside your district.
Yeah.
Okay, so that definitely was a concern. Then
but there are also other SIDs around the state where they're small enough that they have trouble filling their boards, and so we've just so that was a request that came right from my district, and that was neat. The second one that was actually my bill, LB 177. Said that somebody who's a director of a public power district can't be on the can't be, for example, on the Nebraska Public Power Board. And there was a case where the director of Norris Public Power was running to be a board member of NPPD, and that's just all full of conflicts of interest, and so that law took care of that. And then the third one, changing provisions, that has been something I've been working on for a while, and I think I'll just tell you a little bit more about that.
This is relating to licensure of interpreters for the deaf and the hard of hearing.
And right now, or before the bill took effect, and actually it has now, that there were really very few licensure requirements for interpreters, for community sign language interpreters. So what this does was to, and this came from the Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and this puts into place some more requirements for people who are interpreters and who get paid for it. Another neat thing is it also allows for video remote interpreting. And this allows for, off-site to have an interpreter off-site so that interpreting becomes more of a thing that's available all over the state.
So does this apply in any way to the many languages that are now being spoken as second languages in the public school system?
I don't know, and that's a good question because right now, for example, in Park Middle School, I'm told there are 33 languages spoken. So I'm not sure how interpreting works for the deaf and hard of hearing when you're in some other language.
Right.
Yeah. That's a real challenge, by the way, as we get, Omaha has even a bigger challenge in that way.
In addition to the bills that you did get passed, there was several pieces of legislation that were referred. Can you explain to our viewers what a referred piece of legislation means?
Well, in that case, really, it simply, the referred ones were, looking at my list here, were, for example, 3 resolutions, one of them for an interim study to examine the process of eliminating the Nebraska Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. And that's a study that's going on this summer. In fact, we're having hearings in Sydney later this month. So the referred things are usually items that are, for example, resolutions. A number of the other referred bills actually got folded into like the appropriations process. So that's what referral means.
So what exactly was the impetus for eliminating the Nebraska Oil and Gas Conservation Commission? Does that have anything to do with the Keystone Pipeline issue?
No, actually it's separate. It's an issue of fracking. And for those, probably just about everybody anymore knows what fracking is, but it's hydraulic fracturing of deep layers of the Earth's rock to either extract gas, natural gas, or oil, or both. And
by injecting chemical-laden
by injecting water with chemicals in it, and then not only do you put the water down to fracture the rocks, but then you have to draw it back up, and with it comes, dissolved natural gas or dissolved oil. And so that's what I would call fracking waste, the wastewater. And you can't just dump it back into streams because often the rock that's fractured are ancient seabeds, so it's very salty. The water that comes up, for one thing, is salty, plus it's got the chemicals in that were used for the fracking in the first place, plus it's contaminated with oil and natural gas and so on. Mm-hmm. So the fracking waste, you got to do something with it, and there's a large amount of that. And so the issue that really brought this up is a group from out of state applying for a license to truck by semi fracking wastewater and inject it into an abandoned oil well not too far from Scotts Bluff. And that's raised all kinds of concerns in the community, all the way from 100 extra or so tanker semis every day passing over the roads. There are concerns now about things like small earthquakes. What's that going to do? What if there's a spill? Who pays for the spill? And all those kinds of issues. So it's become a really hot issue out west. I stuck my nose into it, as I think I should have. And so
so there's not actually fracking being done in Nebraska at this time, but they're wanting to
in this
bring
case,
that in,
bring in the wastewater, put it into
other areas that
put it
are
into
doing
a
it,
well.
like Pennsylvania and places like that.
And so there are a couple study resolutions from Senator Stinner, who's from Scotts Bluff, and then mine, to look at maybe just eliminating the commission that's now handling that, because I think it was mishandled in a number of ways.
Where would it go then? The EPA, or?
It would stay in Colorado or stay in Wyoming.
Well, yes, point. But okay, all right. That does answer it.
Yeah.
If there's no commission or body here.
Okay.
Yeah, if you eliminate the body that controls it and has control over it, then who controls it?
Well, that's one of the
the
things
state?
we want to look at. For example, maybe the Department of Environmental Quality.
Okay.
That's almost the representative of the EPA in Nebraska,
right.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I feel that the current commission has mishandled that, and I could give you reasons on that. The public hearings were really, when this was first announced, for example, it was announced that only people within a half a mile could officially be heard, only within a half a mile of that well, because they had property interests. And well, finally it was opened up, the hearing was opened up to more people on an unofficial basis. We compared our regulations. For example, some of this fracking wastewater is coming from Colorado. Colorado had regulations probably an inch or two thick, and ours are, a few pages, that sort of thing. So we're importing this wastewater from Colorado, Wyoming, and both of those states have more stringent regulations and also much more stringent bonding requirements in case something goes wrong.
Kind of reminds me a little bit, you say you've been in politics since 1980, about when Robert Carey was governor and we had low-level radioactive
Kind
waste.
of sounds like that,
yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah, that they wanted to, was it Bluff? It was in the northeast part of the state.
County, yeah.
And he just, as governor, said, no, you're not going to transport that stuff here and you're not going to dump it here. And there was a big fight about it. But I'm wondering if this commission probably had something to do with that as well at that time.
I don't know about that part.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was
Where does our governor stand with regard to that issue? Do you know?
I don't think he's come out on it, either way. Okay. But this will be an interesting hearing later this month, and local residents have concerns. Is that open to the public, this hearing? Yes.
Okay, and where will that be held?
It's in Sydney. In fact, let's see if it says exactly where. This will be 9 to 1 p.m. on Tuesday, September 22nd at the Performing Arts Center, Sydney High School in Sydney, Nebraska. Okay. And both of our studies, Senator Stinner's study and mine, will be heard at that time.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Another hot ticket item was eliminating the death penalty. Could you tell us how did that deal get done?
Well, first of all, and again, I got a copy of the questions too, and as I read them over, it says, how did the deal get done? It wasn't really a deal. It was a matter of legislation that's been before the legislature for a long time. And Senator Chambers, of course, is the one who initiated it. But it's been a very thoughtful process. And that's one of the reasons I give this legislature high marks. Some of the Republican senators I know came under great pressure from their party to give one to the governor and not to override the veto. But people that I talked to lost sleep. They did an enormous amount of research. This was something that state senators took very seriously. And of course, then 30 votes overrode the governor's veto. There was heated debate, promises to get all those Republicans out who voted for it, and so I guess we'll see. As we know, this will be a hotly debated issue publicly. Yes. Between now and the election next November, from both sides. And my hope is that citizens will not just take a stand based on partisanism either way, or just a knee-jerk attitude towards it, but really study the death penalty, how it's applied in Nebraska, the inequality of it, the cost of it, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you think that information is out there in the public domain? Do you think there's enough information or enough resources for the public to become informed on their own, or should state senators be doing town meetings and explaining it? What are you doing?
Yeah, I'm sure that state senators on both sides are going to be asked to participate in forums. The information is definitely out there, again, because I guess you could just go back to the committee hearings and read the testimony. You could go to the debate that happened on the floor and look at that. But as we all know, everybody is so busy, and this is a very complex issue with many facets to it. And so I'm hopeful that there's going to be a public debate, not just a knee-jerk reaction from citizens on this matter.
Are you hearing from your constituents on that issue?
I haven't very much because I'm being termed out at the end of this year, but I know that, so in some ways, I didn't get nearly as many emails and phone calls as some of the senators that will be up for re-election. And some of the stuff was really, a death threat or two about the death penalty. Now, does that make sense? But but there was a lot of pressure, a lot of phone calls. And what I admire about my colleagues is they absorbed that, they studied it, and then they voted.
And that's the way it should be.
And that's the way it should be.
We're watching the continuing saga of Medicaid expansion in Nebraska, which previous governor and I think the current one is holding tight against expansion of Medicaid. What do you expect to do, or what do you expect the legislature to do with that issue in 2016? I know you're being term limited out, but what do you think? Is there something coming up that will
Well, I believe so. Now, being in the legislature for such a short time, and 7 years is a short time to learn all the intricacies of government, that hasn't been my area of specialty. You know, you look to other leaders like Kathy Campbell on that one and other people of Health and Human Services. But she's not giving up. And there are other senators from what I hear that will be coming back with the issue. And my vote will certainly be to provide expanded Medicaid in some form. It just doesn't make sense not to.
No, it doesn't. I agree. We have just a couple of minutes left. What are your plans for when you're no longer in the legislature? Just give us a brief 30-second comment.
I don't know yet. I really don't know. I know that I can't sit still for long.
Okay, all right.
So there will be some kind of activity. And
political ambitions, or?
No more political ambitions, but my goal has always been to make a difference. And I've had a lot of public service during my lifetime. I was a teacher. That was my first profession. That's public service. You know, then serving on the city council and the legislature, some partisan politics. And so that'll somehow, you know, define that. And like I say, I will never sit still and watch television all day.
Great. Well, we thank you for not only appearing here today with us. It's been a joy to visit with you, Ken, but also for all the wonderful service that you have provided to the city of Lincoln and Lancaster County and the state of Nebraska.
Well, thank you so much.
Much luck to you in the future.
A pleasure.
That wraps it up for this session of the Watchful Citizen. I am your host, Jane Egan. We've been talking with Senator Ken Haar. Thanks for watching.